I think we all agree that it's important to reduce false alarms, but what's the impact that multi-sensors can have on achieving that? Terry, do you have an opinion on how false alarms can be reduced by multi-sensors?
Yes, I think that firstly, what we need to discuss is the fact is of the impacts of false alarms and the cost, not only in monetary but also inconvenience. That the fact is that anything we can do to reduce false alarms, we should be doing, especially on the design rate. But I feel that that there is a cost implication that's sometimes being overridden, and the use of multi-sensors almost in the relevance of, well, you need two elements, so we're going to reduce the false alarms dramatically because of using multi-sensors, where in fact you're reducing your speed of alarm in the first place by getting both of these elements to activate.
Will, I'd like to bring you in because obviously the FIA website, in case anybody doesn't know, has a lot of information about false alarm reduction and advice for installers and system designers. So from the FIA's point of view, false alarms?
False alarms are the killer to all fire detection alarm systems. In the year 2019 to 2020, government statistics, there were 557,000 incidents that the Fire and Rescue Service attended. 42% of those were false alarms.
Oh dear.
Which gives you somewhere in the region of over 200,000 false alarms a year. So when we talk about multi-sensors and false alarms, everyone thinks, well, it's the solution. You put a multi-sensor in, you get rid of false alarms. It's not. It's a tool, and the multi-sensor gives you the options and the ability to tune out false alarms. The element that a lot of people skip on a fire detection alarm install is the soak period, where we put the system into working order. We let the people occupy the building. I can design you and I can install you a fire alarm system that will never ever false alarm, as long as you do one thing for me: not let anyone in the building. Because it's the way people act and the way people behave in buildings and the things they do, the processes they do, that cause false alarms. So by doing a proper soak period, you can identify what they're doing in the building, how they're using the building, what they're doing, and how that is affecting the fire alarm system. And with the multi-sensor, you now have the ability to tune out those criteria that are causing problems. So it's not a simple, you fit a multi-sensor, you'll get rid of false alarms. No, you fit a multi-sensor, you have the ability to fine-tune your system to tune out the false alarms that are being created by what people are doing in the system. And that's the bit that everyone seems to skip.
That's a good point. Neil, I think as well as people in a building, there's also other factors that might come into play. I'm thinking about, if a building is empty, certain systems won't be running, electrical systems. I'm thinking that sort of false alarms where it affects the signals of the...
Just going back to what Wood explained there, Paul, I think them statistics are quite staggering, really. It's virtually every other call out is a false alarm based on them percentages. And just before coming on to some of the other benefits of that, Terry was explaining the cost of a false alarm from a monetary perspective, which is, of course, a big concern. But from a life safety perspective, the erosion of people's reaction to an alarm is a big factor in this. People will stop reacting or react more complacently to an alarm if they're hearing them on a regular basis. So it's really important. As Will said, it's a big tool on your belt. It's not the one, you fitted a multi-sensor, you've got a solution. But it's a good tool on the belt. And Hochiki, I think, have identified this in their innovative approach to multi-sensors, which I'm sure we'll touch on, but it is something that can be used. And coming on to what you said with different areas and without human interaction, there's clever things you can use multi-sensors for. I mean, I've used them in a previous role where we've used them on running as heat sensors, for example, in a car plant where cars are running in the daytime but switching to optical detectors at night time. You can use them intelligently in schools, potentially with different disciplines going on in the school, teaching in the daytime, night school in the night school classes of an evening. So there are some very intelligent things that you can do with multi-sensors by employing a simple timer or a simple time function onto the unit and how you want it to react. But certainly, as Will said, not a rubber stamp, but you're not going to get a false alarm by using the device.
Well, going back to the stats, the other thing as well, which came out just before Christmas, I mean, I think year to year, I think we've got a 1% increase, last year, and then over a 5-year period, we got a 7% increase. So it's not going in the right direction yet. I mean, I think that maybe some signs here that it's actually slowing down, but it's still going in the wrong direction. And it's quite interesting because obviously we are, from our point of view, what we get reported, the data we get out of the test equipment and everything, we can see more multi-sensors are now actually being tested, which is good. That's a positive thing. It's going in the right direction. But and the other thing as well, which is quite an interesting factor that we can monitor, is that the average time to alarm is increasing, and it has been increasing, over a 15-year period. And I suspect that will continue to occur because this is part of the way that the multi-sensors are actually working, is because they're actually introducing like a greater delay, which becomes more evident in the testing process. So this is something else that is quite interesting. So yeah, we've still got some way to go here. We've got the technology, but we've got to make sure it's being used correctly out there.
I think that's key then. If we're seeing more multi-sensors in the market, but the false alarms are rising, there's a disconnect there, isn't there? Because it seems must be down to training, must be down to engineer and system designers training. I think
there's a number of areas here, and certainly training is one of them. We need to have more training. Maybe the standards need to be a bit more prescriptive, in regards to this, a bit more helpful. I've seen over the period of time I've worked with the standards that they are becoming more and more prescriptive. I mean, obviously, from the point of view of Detectortesters' point of view, we work with standards from all around the world, and you can't help but draw comparisons between, for example, when FPA 72, the American standards, and British standards, and the 3-4 times thicker because they are so much more prescriptive, and we're kind of seeing British standards following along in the same line as well. So this is something I think where we can improve, but certainly lots of room for improvement on the training front, definitely.
And it's also just knowledge as well. It's making sure that the end users or the designers or the consultants originally have that knowledge of what a multi-sensor can do, as opposed to this will be an easy solution.
Yeah. I think experience equals expertise in this case there, Terry, by using people who've been in the industry, proper fire companies know what they're doing. By definition, you're employing that expertise in the design and ultimately in the implementation of the system.
What are some of the key challenges for duty holders in regards to providing faultless fire detection? So you mentioned, Terry, about your recent project with multi-sensors being specified everywhere. So what was the reasoning behind that, do you think, from their point of view? Just a habit they'd got into, or was there a specific reason? Had they had experience with false alarms and they
I think it's a bit of both. I really do. I think it's a bit of both. It was the directness of the instruction that this is what we want to my responsive why, and that's because that's what we have in all our other buildings. So it was a legacy issue as opposed to an actual design issue. But we have, as a company, we have the design responsibility. So that's where I'm in discussions with them at the moment, saying, if we're going to certificate the design on this, then we're not going to go down the route that you've advised us to, and even building control have got involved and have asked the same question. So again, it's trying to get that knowledge and understanding through to not only the specifiers but to the end users. That's something that on this one we're pushing for.
Yeah, ownership of design is really what you guys are being tasked to do, and if you're being directed incorrectly, then you need to be assertive enough to say you're making a mistake.
Which is exactly what we're doing, and we've got a meeting this afternoon to run through that. But also, one thing that we need to discuss regarding this is regular maintenance. That the systems are regularly maintained, and the end user understands the reasoning behind the maintenance, and also the environment that the systems are installed in. Going back to Will's comment regarding the soak test, but that soak test in theory is ongoing throughout the life of the system, and every little false alarm needs to be recorded. It should be recorded, but it's something that our service desk find isn't being done, and luckily with the modern control panels we can extract that information to update ourselves. So it's trying to find the end user or the facilities company for the end user to make sure that they fully understand what they have in their building and how it's configured. The other problem we have, which we've encountered quite a lot, is turnover of staff when it comes to building managers, facilities companies, etc., etc. So we try to almost offer up a training pack every time that a new person takes over, or to try and give them as much information as possible, because we know it will benefit us overall throughout the service period of that system.
Can I just ask you a quick question? When you said it's important for the building owners to record every false alarm, if you had that information, what would you do with that? How is that beneficial to you guys?
Well, that's very beneficial, because then we can isolate the areas where there are problems. Perfect example, you could have a detector that keeps activating at 2 o'clock every morning. So what do? They just silence and reset because they go to the room and can't find it. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, an air conditioning plant or a boiler might kick in, thus causing the alarm in the first place. So it's isolating those problems. But it's also to do with reputation. That as a company, you have a reputation. And not only Neil mentioned the fact that people become complacent with these systems, but you also lose your reputation as a company dealing with these false alarms issues. So that's why they need to be recorded. They need to be seriously investigated and resolved.
I think the false alarms can help you build up an actual mental picture of the environment and what's actually happening. We're probably coming back to what Will was explaining. When people come into a building, you're going to start experiencing false alarms. We've all probably seen it, students creeping out onto a balcony or wherever for a crafty cigarette, not picking on students here, by the way, but you know what I mean. It's very often in a building, there's a good reason for a false alarm at a certain time, and with that information you can build a picture. But what I think's really encouraging listening to Terry is, from an end user perspective, what they need to understand from my side of looking at it is that when you're placing an order for a fire alarm system to be installed, you're not just placing an order, or you're not just buying the fire alarm, you're buying expertise. And what Terry's explaining there right through the whole process is the expertise, the way they look after the end user from cradle to grave almost through its process. You can go and get a system installed for whatever cost, but what is the real cost?